we have this editorial from today's The Hindu which claims that gradually India is moving towards a censorship state like China or Pakistan. So it is something you understand this way, that regulation is okay. What this article is claiming. So regulation is okay, but when this regulation becomes very often, this regulation is used to remove certain content, then this very often removal of the content is equivalent to censorship. Now obviously this article is a kind of biased, no doubt, but even if it is biased, this article is raising some very good distinction between regulation and censorship that we need to understand. So how does regulation of online content, when does regulation of online content become censorship? So there is a distinction between regulation and censorship. So when you are regulating online content, then when it can become censorship, examine in the context of increasing state intervention. So the state intervention is increasing in social media. Now how you can approach this type of questions? When you read this article, this distinction must click in your head. आपको ये समझ में आना चाहिए ये आर्टिकल पढ़ने के बाद कि यार ये रेगुलेशन और सेंसरशिप को दो तरीके से बताने की कोशिश कर रहा है. मोस्ट ऑफ द केसेस में क्या होता है कि व्हेन वी रीड द आर्टिकल वी स्टार्ट नोटिंग डाउन ईच एंड एवरी पॉइंट वट एवर इट इज बिंग रिटन ओवर हियर. वी विल गो फॉर द सेक्शन दिस, उस सेक्शन के भी नोट्स हम बना लेंगे. बट द करेक्ट अप्रोच इज टू आइडेंटिफाई द कोर ऑफ दिस आर्टिकल, व्हाट दिस आर्टिकल इज एक्चुअली टॉकिंग अबाउट. So the distinction between regulation and censorship. How can you understand it? First take regulation. Regulation is something when it like some rules are like setting up of rules or standards. When we set up some rules or standards to control operation or functioning, that is called regulation. For example, take the example of the government has certain rules that say that social media should not have content that threaten the integrity of country. Right. So this is some rules have been set that the content on your social media platform should not be threatening the integrity of the country. That means the content should not be promoting secessionist activities. The content should not be promoting hatred. Right. So if the government has set up that kind of rules or standards, that will be called regulation. Then you will ask, what is this censorship? What is this censorship? So censorship is you can say some kind of order or direction, obviously by the government authorities. These orders and directions seek to remove certain content. Whenever there is certain content that the government authorities seem that they should be removed, and they are issuing directions, orders for the removal of those, that will be called censorship. For example, take the example of like remove the content or videos that criticize the government. Government very often like invokes this kind of orders and says that it is very anti-government, anti-establishment, so these should be removed. Now there is a very marked distinction is that these rules and this regulation thing is a general application. General application means these rules and standards are already set in some act or in some order. Somewhere it is already set. It is written and it is like required for the functioning of those social media bodies, or it can relate to anything. But this censorship is something that applies when something is triggered. Something is triggered. For example, there is a sudden protest against the government. Then that trigger, government orders removal of the content because it feels that there is a threat to the peace and harmony in the country. For the example I am saying. So this is also very distinct, very like minor distinction. Now the question, like the overall idea is the when does it happen that regulation is becoming censorship? So it happens because the boundary between this censorship and regulation, this boundary is blurred. This boundary is blurred. What it means? It means that there is the interpretation of rules, on regarding the content, how the content, what the content is, and which rule should apply to that content. That interpretation actually decides whether it will be regulated or it will be censored. For example, take the example of this integrity of country. This we said, na, integrity of the country. In this example, here, like if a speech is being given at a protest site where the speech is anti-government speech, like the speech is calling for the asking to raise a voice of protest everywhere. The speech from Delhi at Jantar Mantar, it is calling for like start doing protest everywhere, in your house, in your town, in the northeast, in Himalayan countries, in Jammu and Kashmir, in south, in Lakshadweep. And it is like very fiery kind of speech. Government may consider that this is a threat to integrity, though it is just a speech at a protest site, and that speech is often like caused because of some firing of emotions, but the government may consider it as a threat to integrity of the country, and that speech can be censored. So this is something is like which has recently happened. This article is talking about that removal of some videos, some reels related to Prime Minister, this kind of thing. So actually that is all about interpretation. So how the interpretation is happening, this how the government is interpreting, and that government will lead to threat to integrity, and that will lead to removal of content, and then it becomes censorship. Now the next thing that is highlighted in this article is that when these become often, then regulation often leading to censorship. पता ही नहीं चल रहा है कब रेगुलेट हो रहा है, कब सेंसरशिप हो रहा है. इतना ऑफन हो रहा है, इतनी जल्दी चीज़ों को रिमूवल, कंटेंट रिमूवल के ऑर्डर्स आ रहे हैं. पीपल आर फीलिंग कि ये तो नॉर्मल हो गया. व्हेन दैट नॉर्मलाइजेशन हैपेंस, like censorship wala normalization, then that is something called censor state, which is being highlighted in this article. So this is a very nuanced topic. I feel you should study because UPSC can ask such kind of questions. Now we will move to our next article. Next article is related to the Assam floods. So this Assam flood is something, it has been in news, and like a few days ago also a very good article appeared on this. So this article says that human factors worsened the Assam floods. So it did not happen just because of the climatic factors. Like climate is changing, that's why there is a extreme rainfall, and that's why there is like heavy floods, severe floods leading to loss of life and livelihood. Climatic changes, climatic factors are one of the reasons, but this article highlights how different human factors, different human interventions in the landscape is actually has caused the severe impact that the flood has had taken. Now, how you can understand it? Take this question. So, the severity of disasters is increasingly shaped by human-induced vulnerabilities rather than natural hazards alone. So even if someone is living in a place which is full of natural hazards, prone to natural hazards, how that natural hazard will turn up. How that natural hazard will turn up, its severity is ultimately decided by the human-induced vulnerabilities. How the humans have taken command of that landscape. So that is something very important point that is being highlighted in this article that we will understand using this question. So first thing, you should understand that what this article is actually saying and what it is we should also apply our head, that the atmospheric events, for example rainfall or cyclones, these have been occurring since ages. It is not that rainfall and cyclones have started to happen in past couple of decades. It is happening since ages. It happened during Harappan civilization times as well. It happened during British times as well. It happened during Mughal times as well. And history has it is very well recorded the kinds of famines, the kinds of floods that have happened. But their impact is actually determined by how humans have treated the landscape. That will ultimately decide what the impact will be. So if the humans have treated the landscape with some very selfish way, they have degraded the landscape, then obviously the impact will also be very severe. Take, for example, consider the Indus Valley civilization, or which you call Harappan civilization. If you have studied Harappan civilization, then how the Harappan civilization declined, one of the reasons is flooding. That severe flooding happened around the Indus Valley, which led to its decline. Now, why this flooding was one of the reasons? Because the Harappan people started encroaching the riverbeds. They started encroaching the riverbeds, or they started even to try to change the river course. How the river was flowing, they started trying to dam the river, to control its water, to channelize the water to their fields. And all this happened in the name of development. So this is something, how the natural river is flowing, and if people are encroaching on its beds, encroaching on the banks, and leading to a severe excessive sand mining, or even trying to change its course from this to this, then obviously the natural gradient of the river will be changed, and this often leads to flooding when there is sudden excessive flow of water owing to extreme rainfall. So this is a very good historical example which you can give, and this example is not given in this article. This example I am suggesting you. So that's why it is said that how humans are interfering with the landscape, how humans are treating the landscape, that actually decides the severity of the natural hazard. Now, what kind of human activities? What kind of human activities that are causing this severity of natural hazards? The first is unplanned urbanization. You take any city in the country today, any city, which is on the bank of any particular river, any city you take, that river is getting encroached daily, day by day. People are encroaching its bank, building homes, building resorts, building hotels, building a number of stuffs they are doing on the banks of the river. So this is unplanned urbanization. Other than that, they are pouring in, they are draining all their waste in the river, which is again changing the river water course. One another activity is rapid deforestation. So this I need not emphasize much. You all know how these forests have been acting as how they have been like trying to hold the soil, how they were like preventing the soil runoff, water runoff. But when the deforestation happens, the soil is left bare, and that actually leads to landslides and other natural disasters. Then there is something wetland destruction. Almost all the cities in India have some kind of age-old wetlands, and those wetlands actually act as a sponge. A sponge means whenever there is excess rainfall, all the water, excess water used to be drained to that wetland. छोटा सा तालाब हो, हर शहर में आप अपने शहर में पता कीजिए, कहीं ना कहीं छोटा सा तालाब होगा, तो एक्सेस रेन वाटर यूज टू गेट ड्रेन टू दैट वेटलैंड, तो शहर में फ्लडिंग जैसी सिचुएशन नहीं होती थी. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, यू मस्ट हैव स्टडीड अबाउट बेंगलोर फ्लड एंड चेन्नई फ्लड्स एंड हाउ लाइक वेटलैंड डिस्ट्रक्शंस हैव बीन एसोसिएटेड विद दोस. देन द अदर रीजन इज रिवर बैंक erosion. Very simple, river bank erosion, which we discussed a while ago. So these are some of the human activities, and how they are impacting is that they are actually degrading the natural drainage capacity. These words you should use in your answers. Natural drainage capacity, that is being degraded, and that is leading to increased flood height. This beautiful term is being written over here in this article, like somewhere it is written, yes. So natural drainage capacity, increasing flood height and downstream impacts. So while reading the news article, if you are coming through these terms now, you should take note of this. And actually these terms are self-explanatory terms, value-rich terms, which will actually give you very decent marks in your exams. So this is like how human treated landscape, how humans are treating landscape, leading to severity of disasters. Now add to all these one more scenario. The other scenario is the habitation of vulnerable sections. देखिए, जो बड़े बड़े लोग होते हैं, अमीर लोग होते हैं, रईस लोग होते हैं, दे बिल्ड देयर होम्स ऑन अ सेफ एरिया एंड दे हैव ऑल द रिसोर्सेज टू प्रोटेक्ट देम फ्रॉम एनी नेचुरल डिजास्टर दैट मे हिट देम. But when it comes to vulnerable sections, people living on the margins, they are actually living in slums. They often living in like flood prone river banks. उन्हें और कहीं रहने की जगह नहीं मिली, उन्हें और कहीं रहने की जगह दी नहीं है. So they are like living, residing on the river banks. So whenever the flood is happening, they are being hit, the first one to get hit. So this is something is very important. This is also highlighted over here. So if UPSC like asks a question on the connection of society and disaster, the interlinkage of society and disaster, then you can give this angle that the habitation of vulnerable sections, how vulnerable sections are living, how they are surviving, and how they are getting severely impacted because of any natural disasters. A very good way forward is also given in this article that says that climate resilience does not always mean cutting emissions. जब भी क्लाइमेट रेजिलियंस की बात आती है, टैकलिंग क्लाइमेट चेंज की बात आती है, तो वी स्टार्टेड फोकसिंग ऑन रिड्यूसिंग एमिशंस. बट इट इज मोर देन दैट एक्चुअली. इट इज ऑल्सो अबाउट सस्टेनेबल लैंड management. How you are managing the land, to what extent the land management is sustainable, that also actually decides whether you are building a climate resilient society or not. So this is something, this article, which most of you may ignore, but this is actually loaded with information, and I will recommend that you study it. And this is the approach based on which you should study this article. Now we will move to our next article. That article is also something, yes, this one. So Supreme Court stays order striking down jobs of families of Garud stampede victims. So he is the CM of Tamil Nadu, CM Joseph. So he, before the elections, he tried to hold a political rally in a place called Karur. Karur नाम की जगह पे उन्होंने एक political rally करने की कोशिश की, and that rally, a stampede happened at that rally, और उस stampede में multiple people died. When he became the CM, he started to offer compensation to the victims of these stampede families, these stampede victims. What kind of compensation? He thought of providing government jobs to the family members of the victims. भाई अच्छी बात है, compensation देना चाहिए. But this matter reached Madras High Court, and High Court strike down this offer. High Court said that no, you cannot be selective when it comes to giving compensation, because there are n number of people out there who have been victims of one or other kind of scenario, one or other kind of hazards or tragedies. Why are you giving compensation only to the stampede victims, only to the victims of the stampede which happened in your political rally? So they strike down this order, and this person, the government, Tamil Nadu government, reached the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court then has for the time being has stayed the Tamil High Court order, and more hearing is awaited. More hearing will happen, and in future we will know what the Supreme Court decides. But having said that, this article is still loaded with information that we must understand. Understand this way. Selective state support in times of distress can turn administrative discretion into instrument of discrimination. So there are two terms. One is administrative discretion. A state machinery has the discretion to act or to give compensation. But if that discretion becomes selective, that discretion gets selective, then it will lead to discrimination. This is the question. And you need to understand that way, that even if the state is giving compensation, it should not be selective. It should think about the broader perspective. It should think from a broader perspective. So understand this way, that not all the victims of a tragedy get a state support. True or false? If a tragedy happens, do all the victims of all the tragedies are getting a state support? Certainly not. Because the state support is actually dependent on eligibility criteria. The state sets some sort of eligibility, that if you follow those norms, then you will be eligible to get the compensation, and it ultimately requires documents and paperwork. For example, take the example of COVID-19. It happened in 2021. N number of people have died in that period, and lot of people have died because of this COVID itself. Some died in hospitals, right? Others died in silence in their home. Government gave compensation to those who could clearly provide evidence that they died because of COVID. Government ने बहुत compensation दिया COVID victim families को. But there are lot of people who could not claim this compensation because वो कभी hospital गए ही नहीं. They died in silence in their home, and those families actually entered to poverty because their breadwinner has died. And ऐसे आपको बहुत सारे examples मिल जाएंगे अगर आप Google करोगे. So this state support, when it comes to supporting the families in distress, that is actually dependent on eligibility criteria and documents. अगर documents नहीं है तो एक जो बुजुर्ग व्यक्ति है उसे भी compensation नहीं मिलता हमारे देश में. They have also to run from pillar to post. ये तो एक एंगल हो गया. Second angle is something very important, that is political gains. Political gains. Very often compensation, take this example itself, like how compensating a stampede happen in political rally. So obviously whosoever died in that rally, those were affiliated to one political party. मैक्सिमम लोग वही होंगे ना जो उस पर्टिकुलर पॉलिटिकल पार्टी के सपोर्टर होंगे, उस रैली में जाएंगे, एंड दे डाइड इन दैट रैली बिकॉज ऑफ द स्टैम्पीड, एंड दैट पॉलिटिकल पार्टी कम्स टू पावर, and then it starts giving jobs or compensation to the victims, which ultimately happen to be their own supporters. So this is about the political gains, कि हमारा नेता हमारे लिए काम कर रहे हैं. What is the meaning of discretion? Discretion का क्या मतलब है? Discretion will be dependent how the compensation is provided, that depends on severity of the incident. है कि नहीं? एक रोड एक्सीडेंट हो गया जिसमें एक दो लोग किसी गांव में गुजर गए, दे डाइड बिकॉज ऑफ अ रोड एक्सीडेंट. नन ऑफ द न्यूज़पेपर्स कवर्ड दैट आर्टिकल. Local administration provided 20,000 rupees for the cremation activities. That kind of support they provided. But another major accident happened on a tourist route where 10 people died because they were pilgrims. Government comes into action and they starts offering 10 lakh of rupees. So the severity of the incident actually decides what kind of discretion is, how the discretion will be functioning. And based on this severity is the popular sentiment. अब गांव में एक रोड एक्सीडेंट में दो लोग गुजर गए, people hardly cared about that. But if 10 people died on a pilgrimage, then there is a huge popular sentiment towards them. Like, oh, like everyone started offering prayers, everyone started offering flowers. So this popular sentiment is there, and the government or the political party has to cash in on that popular sentiment. They cannot take any action that goes against the popular sentiment. And another very important is vote bank. So these are some factors which actually decide how the discretion will work. Otherwise, government may offer compensation. They can like set up some kind of rule that all the people of road accidents will get this amount of compensation. But we don't have effective implementation of any such kind of rules. And this discretion becomes discrimination. This discretion becomes discrimination. When we started being selective. जब हम selective हो जाते हैं, owing to our vote bank, owing to the popular sentiment, owing to our political gains, we will become discriminatory. Our support system will become discriminatory, and that will be a violation of right to equality. That will be a violation of due process of law. And if we start discriminating that way, there is already a long waiting list. So this article says that the Madras High Court, what they said, that there were waiting lists in every government department for appointments on compassionate grounds. So it is not that only these people deserve jobs or government employment. There are n number of people, multiple people are actually waiting for that. So if you start giving compensation to the victims of this stampede, then the floodgates will be opened. Other people will also start seeking employment, and employment had to be granted only in accordance with seniority and not with reference to the immediate nature of relief to be granted. This is something the Madras High Court has observed. It is in violation of fundamental rights to equality and due process of law. Supreme Court will obviously be considering these points when it hears in future, but for the time being, we should understand that when discrimination happens, the constitutional values are actually disregarded. Very good way forward you can give over here, that is specific guidelines should govern the appointments on compassionate grounds. There should be specific guidelines, and the government should come up with these guidelines, that on what basis, on what eligibility criteria, on what grounds the government jobs will be offered on compassionate grounds. And these guidelines should be immune from political affiliations. So this is something, it should be immune from political affiliations. Political angle नहीं होना चाहिए इसमें. So this is something, an important article, very very easy to ignore this article, but again it is loaded with information. A very good article like article 162 is also mentioned over here, that what is the extent of executive power of the state when it comes to deciding a policy to aid the victims of a tragedy. This also you can mention in this answer.